What's up, Period 6? It's me, Mr. Munoz, coming at you on a Thursday morning. I'm about to see y'all later on today, but I just want to review some of the topics that I think are going to be really important for you to remember as we come into a little bit of a review. We're going to do a quiz game. We're going to just see how much you've learned and how much you've held on to from this week's studies. I'm going to try to do these every week. I know that people have to miss at times, and sometimes there's need for clarification. This class is probably going to be a little challenging now that the concurrent enrollment piece is really coming in, particularly with the writing. So we'll be doing a lot of writing, history writing, which I think is going to be really good for you. Whether or not you decide to go straight to college writing, I'll tell you what, as somebody who became a good writer, I wasn't a good writer when I was young, but as somebody who became a good writer, I can tell you that I've had a lot of opportunities because I was able to express myself in a written way and show people how qualified I was through writing. So this week, particularly on Wednesday, yesterday, the 9th of February, we watched the first half of episode 3 or 4, I don't remember which one, of Black in Latin America, Mexico and Peru, The Black Grandma in the Closet. So I love this documentary series, especially as it focuses on Mexico, the place of my ancestors and a lot of you. A lot of you travel to Mexico. A lot of you are there pretty frequently to see family and to just stay connected to the culture. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. But most of you expressed to me yesterday when we were finishing the film that this whole history of Black people in Mexico is like completely new to you. You didn't know that there was actually a lot of Black history in Mexico. And I think a lot of people didn't know that. I didn't know that until I really got into this and really started learning the deeper parts of the history. So there's a few quick takeaways that I want you to just keep in mind about Mexico as they relate to larger Latin American themes, right? So the first takeaway is that there were more people kidnapped from West Africa and sold into slavery in the Americas that went to Mexico than any other place, except for maybe Brazil, right? So what that means is that I think, and somebody check me on this, I think the statistic was that something like 50% of captured and abducted Africans who were brought across the Atlantic Ocean to be sold into slavery came first to Mexico, and particularly at San Juan de Ulloa, the port in Veracruz. And so as consequently, there's actually a lot of remnants of Black history and culture in Veracruz and in the Yucatan, in what we call the Ruta Maya in that area. The second takeaway is that race in Mexico and in Latin America during this time was developed in a really unique way. Because the Catholic Church was more inclusive than its Protestant counterpart in Europe, and and that inclusiveness comes with a really big asterisk, right? But because they were more inclusive, they didn't prevent people from marrying, but what they did do is create racial categories. This was a caste system, and actually it wasn't taught to me as a caste system when I first learned it, but it's a caste system. It assigns power and status and importance based on racial identity. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. The name for this caste system was limpieza de sangre. And this idea of limpieza de sangre wasn't something they just created when they came to the Americas. It actually existed in Spain during the time that Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived together in Spain. So they were even calculating racial identity based on your parents in Spain before they came here. So this was a system that they used back home that they brought to the Americas. The caste system in the Americas, and especially we see it in Mexico and Peru. These are the two places that are focused on in the documentary that show these casta paintings. So they made these paintings that were like everywhere. And the paintings would tell you what your racial identity was. And I'm gonna post an image of that. Some of you said you saw it at the art museum already when you went with Mr. Adams. But I think that's a really important thing for us all to keep in mind, is that they advertised this and they made sure everybody knew their place, right? So for example, if you had a Spanish father and an Indian mother, their words, not mine, then you were considered a mestizo. If you had an a Spanish mother and an Indian father, you were called a castizo. And some of these didn't happen quite as often. Mulatto is one that comes up a lot in reference to African people in Mexico. So that's the first thing to also keep in mind, is that they had this whole racial, this whole racial recipe book, if you will, of when you take this and add it to this, then it leads to this. And some of the paintings are kind of offensive and kind of stereotypical. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. The second thing is that Black history in Mexico isn't just represented by slavery, right? Black history in Mexico is also represented by people who work towards Mexican independence and liberation. So in particular, they talk about Jose Maria Morelos. There's a state named after him. There's a city in Michoacan, Morelia, is named after him. And Morelos was a person who was of Black heritage and who was one of the leaders of the Mexican War of Independence in 1810. And as we mentioned multiple times, the first president of Mexico was half Black. His mother was Black. She was African, or Afro-Mexican as it would be. And Skip Gates makes a joke about how they had their Barack Obama before we did, like 180 years before we did, right? Because he was literally the same racial makeup as Obama. So what does this mean more than anything? And there are clues as to where Africanness lives. The music, like the fandango and baile folklorico, a good number of those bailes come from African culture. The famous song La Bamba it used to be an old Angolan slave song. So this is all just really interesting stuff. But what does this mean for Latin America at large? Well, we know that in Peru, there's a similar situation of racial identity and blackness in Peru being sort of ignored and dismissed. But it's important to also recognize that while enslavement is the main story of blackness in Latin America, it's not the only story. So Brazil prides itself on being a racial democracy, and Brazil, interestingly, was probably the last independent country of Latin America to outlaw slavery. They ended slavery sometime in 1883. You'll have to check the text. The dates aren't that important, but they were kind of the last one. And so this idea of blackness has been in conflict for a long time. Haiti and the Dominican Republic share an island, the island of Hispaniola is what Columbus called it, but where Haiti, the first independent country in the Americas, in Latin America, was a French-speaking country that identified as an African nation. Toussaint Louverture, the leader of the Haitian Revolution, really emphasized that Haiti was a Black country. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind is that the Dominican Republic, while it has the same degree of Blackness, more identifies as as a Moreno nation. And so they go to great lengths to kind of deny their Blackness, all the way to the point that if you are Black in the Dominican Republic and you tell somebody that you're Black, they'll correct you. They'll say, actually, say that you're Moreno, right? Like brown, right? So there's a lot of anti-Blackness and a lot of denial that sort of happens there. Another story is Cuba. The Cuban Revolution really brought back a lot of Blackness and a lot of Black pride into Cuba. So the readings kind of go into a little bit of this, and it revisits this topic. Blackness is not a main focus of our textbook, but it does kind of touch on some of these elements of the African presence of the Americas. And one thing that I can tell you for sure is that even though African history and culture has influenced Latin America in a really profound and meaningful way, it isn't really portrayed as such. And I think that's a real loss to us as a raza and to the world at large, because again, we're constantly underestimating and undermining the importance of Black people in the Americas. So I hope that helps you understand what we need to be thinking about this week as we both celebrate Latinx heritage, but also celebrate Black history. Let me know in the comments if you want whether these videos are helpful. I enjoy doing them. I like talking to you. I like to talk. I'll always talk. And I hope this helps you understand some of the concepts we're dealing with. All right. Well, I will see y'all in a few short hours. Can't wait.